Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I am Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular weekly update of what's going on in the state capitol during the legislative session. And in fact, this is week 13, which is the 90th legislative day out of a planned 105-day session. So as you can see, we're down to the last 2 weeks of the session, and the next cutoff date that the legislature has set for itself is for policy bills to be passed by the opposite house of the legislature. So Senate bills have to be passed by the House bills have to be passed by the Senate. Any bills that make that cutoff, which is on Wednesday, April 12th, are considered alive for the session. There have been over 1,600 bills have been introduced since January 9th when the legislature came into session, and that's being narrowed down to more like 300 to 400 bills. And we'll see which ones end up going to the governor's desk for him to sign. The next operation after that is to pass a state budget. So I'll have updates about that in the future. For today, however, I want to hit on a number of issues just to tell you the latest things that have been happening. The first one is not even directed to the legislature, but many people feel that COVID is over, the restrictions over, we're tapering down. And this last week, the state government checked off the last box, I consider, which is the end of masking. So the State Department of Health announced that they would now no longer require masks to be worn by the general public in healthcare settings, dentist's office, doctor's office, hospitals, clinics. And that went into effect on April 2nd. And many people are saying that as, well, the end of the restrictions. That raises the question of why we were not able to debate the restrictions at the time. That's something the Washington Policy Center was very concerned about, that when society is going through a health crisis, that's when you need more information about the benefits of vaccines, masking, social distancing, closing schools, shutting down the economy. These are all very, in policy terms, radical, extreme actions that were taken. And yet at the time, as all of us remember, it was almost impossible to debate those openly and honestly. Some viewpoints were suppressed or censored. And one is the debate about masking. So the State Department of Health has put an end to that. So no more controversy, no more mandate, but it does leave, again, for us, the policy guidance is the healthcare measures are most effective when they are voluntary and when people are able to discuss them openly. And that's the lesson that we want our public health and elected officials to learn going forward, so that the next time we get into a health crisis, or any other kind of crisis, in fact, just ordinary people are able to debate the options openly without being dictated to. So I thought that was an important turning point. The next item I'll touch on is a bill, SB 5765, which is kind of a breakthrough piece of information that if a new bridge is built over the Columbia River connecting Washington State with Portland, this bill would provide that bridge facility would be, quote, toll eligible facility, which means they would put a toll on it. Eligible doesn't mean anything. If they're saying that it's eligible for tolls, then you know for a fact they're going to put tolls on it. This idea has been kicked around for a long time, but this bill is the first official action that we've seen that would make a toll on a future bridge over the Columbia River a reality, and we're almost certain that that is being built into the planning whenever that project goes forward. The other point of debate regarding what's called the Columbia River crossing is whether to put light rail on it or not. Portland and Oregon are insisting on this, but there's an argument on the other side that the bridge would be more effective and move more traffic if it didn't also have to have light rail on it. So that's another issue that's out there. Another item is that on April 11th, the Universal Healthcare Commission met or is going to meet. I mean, that's coming up. And our health expert, Elizabeth Hubby, has been tracking this. She will attend this public meeting. She is going to speak and provide public comment. And this is one of those detailed, grinding, behind the scenes government entities that's just marching forward and doing its work. In this case, promoting universal socialized healthcare. The proposal also includes banning private insurance. This is a long way from being enacted. There was a popular ballot measure that failed to get enough signatures, so it died. But the reason that Elizabeth is jumping on this is because we want to get our analysis and information in early, put it officially on the record. Elizabeth is absolutely tenacious about this issue. There is no move that this healthcare commission makes that she doesn't find out about. then she signs up to testify or she sends information. She's contacted all the commissioners with our research. And again, the point is to move early and often in order to send the message that Washingtonians like their private health insurance. We need a more vigorous, competitive, affordable market. We do not need to move in the direction of universal health care. This commission is definitely moving in that direction, and we want to explain to them the fierce opposition that this idea would meet if it starts to be pushed to the general public. That's why we don't wait around for them to set it up. We get engaged early and provide our research and analysis that way. Next, along the same lines on healthcare is a bill, SB 5767. This was just introduced, kind of a quickie under the radar bill. Again, Elizabeth spotted it. So did Jason, our budget person, because this proposes a new tax. It's a 7.5% tax on what are called excess salaries being paid at hospitals and other healthcare entities. It's called an excise tax, so not an income tax, and that's building on the Supreme Court's recent ruling that the capital gains income tax is, in fact, according to them, an excise tax. Of course, our analysis shows that it's not, but the judges insisted that it is anyway. And so that went into effect about a week or so ago. And now we're seeing the follow-up, which is a new bill to impose a tax on the compensation earned by hospital administrators and doctors. The other part of this that's kind of comical is, I'll read from the intent section of the bill. The bill says the legislature intends to expand access to affordable health care through a tax on excess compensation paid by hospitals. So what is the logic of this? You charge a 7.5% tax on doctors and administrators in order to make healthcare more affordable. We could immediately show that what hospitals do is they just charge 7.5% more for all of their bills in order to cover the tax. So this kind of circular reasoning doesn't work at all. And we proposed ways to make healthcare more consumer-driven, more competitive, to reduce costs, increase access. This bill, as I mentioned, was introduced just under the radar really quickly. Too late for holding public hearings and things like that, past the deadlines already. So we asked ourselves, well, what is the purpose of introducing it? And the answer is, building on the momentum of that court case I mentioned, the sponsors of this idea want to create a platform early on. They know the bill is not going to pass, but they are getting set up for next year. So being tipped off about that, we will be monitoring it. And when we come around to it again, as I said before, we are going to act early in arguing against this idea and help keep it from getting traction in the first place. Next issue I'll touch on is Todd Myers' work on the burden and impact of the new carbon tax that Governor Inslee signed last year. It just recently went into effect this year. So Todd contacted British Petroleum, which runs a refinery in the state. It's one of the largest petroleum wholesalers in the state, in the world, as a matter of fact, and asked them specifically, what is the economic impact of this tax? BP got back to him with documentation that shows that they are charging 46 cents a gallon additional to retailers in order to cover the cost of this tax. Todd noted that that's a little bit more than the actual tax is today. And of course, BP responds in classic economic terms. Their point is, this tax creates uncertainty into the future. We need to cover our costs. Therefore, we're charging a little bit more than the actual tax is today because we expect that this is going to go up in the future. This seems to be a logical response that policymakers never think about. And that is, when they add uncertainty into a market players anticipate about what's going to happen in the future. That builds in higher costs. Now we can measure that. And by comparison, and so the result was gas prices in Washington on a retail level increased 5 cents in 1 week. And then Todd checked with neighboring states, and in Idaho, the price of gas fell by 2 cents over 1 week. So we are going in the opposite direction of prices in other states. And then the last issue I'll touch on is a victory for open government. We're very excited about this. It's an issue that we've worked on for a long time. A nonprofit legal group called Citizens Action Defense Fund just recently won a case to end secret collective bargaining between the governor and public sector unions. We have talked about this issue for years. We provided a lot of the background and the data that would end up being used in the court's case. The argument is the Public Records Act applies to these negotiations. What that means is that when the union offers what kind of pay raises and benefits they want, and then the governor offers his counter offer, all of that had been done before behind closed doors in the past. Our point is this should be a public process. People should at least see what the different competing offers are, and then what the dollar impact is on the Treasury when there's an agreement finally, and that's put into the budget. So the Citizens Action Defense Fund, they won this case outright. They also had all of their legal costs awarded by the court, which makes sense because if citizens have to go to court to get the government to follow the law, at least state agencies should have to pay for that. They're covering the legal fees. So what will happen on April 28th is this was ruled in Thurston County Superior Court, and the judge there ordered the state on April 28th to have these different budget proposals being made public. These negotiations are already done. They were done last fall between the governor and the unions, but now at least we'll see what the documentation is. And the judge is also assessing a penalty on the agency for violating the Public Records Act. So again, this is important because we're trying to change the behavior of how the Inslee administration operates and for them to follow through on their promises, be transparent, be open. And in this case, we know that the governor was hiding this information because he is negotiating with his own political allies. In the case of Democrats who are running for public office, public sector unions are their largest supporters and financiers. Then when the official is elected, he ends up negotiating with his friends in order to find out, establish a new contract for unions going forward. We're just trying to bring that whole process out into the open and create more honest government in our state. So those are the issues that I'm going to touch on in this update. As I mentioned, we're entering the final 2 weeks of the session. It's now becoming a challenge for Democrats to manage the clock. If bills are loaded down with too many amendments, if it clogs up the calendar, we've seen cases of where even important bills end up being dropped in order to clear the way for something else. So we'll be watching that process going forward. The next live Facebook on the go session that we're going to have with our policy experts is on Tuesday, April 11th at noon, lasts for 1 hour. Anyone is welcome to join through our website. And then coming up later on in April, we have a regional reception in Spokane with a lot of our supporters in Eastern Washington. And with that, I'll wrap up and wish everyone a very happy and holy Easter. And I will be back again next week with more information. Thanks.